네, 오징어 게임 리뷰에 오신 것을 환영합니다.
This video was sponsored by Skillshare.
Squid Game Season 2 is coming to the world on Boxing Day, and so, over the next series of videos, I will tell you guys what I thought of the first season. I watched it on release when it came out 3 years ago, and thoroughly enjoyed it. Right up until the final episode, which left quite a sour taste in my mouth. By returning to the show after the dust has settled, I will be piecing together both what made this show successful and where it fell short. This will be the first in a weekly series of videos on Squid Game. Some will be review videos like this one, some will talk about the inspirations for the show, and others might even speculate on Season 2. And then I will proceed to review Season 2. This review won't be like your average review, because I've actually spent the last 18 months living in South Korea. Hopefully this experience will bring some more unique insights than your average critic, alongside my usual analysis, compliments, and critique. I've learned a fair amount of Korean during my time here, and I like to think I know a bit more about the culture than how Western media portrays the country. This is why I'm really interested in trying out Kim Gi-hwan's English course for conversation skills over on Skillshare. This is a class that's suited to my abilities, but if you've never spoken a word of Korean in your life, there are loads of beginner courses to check out. In fact, there's a ton of languages you can learn on Skillshare. Like, some teachers even offer one-to-one sessions if you're serious about learning a new skill. Skillshare doesn't strictly offer language courses, by the way. Most of the website is actually catered to learning creative skills like photography, filmmaking, art, and animation. If you're creative and curious enough, Skillshare will have a class for you. The first 500 people to click my link in the description will get a 30-day free trial of Skillshare Premium. Wait, why am I wearing a hat? What happened to my jumper? Ah! Now, without further ado, let's get on with the review. To produce a successful Netflix series, your first episode has to be an absolute sucker punch of quality for the audience. Squid Game Episode 1 does exactly that. Aside from CGI blood being obviously CGI and some kind of bad dubbing from a certain character, there isn't anything particularly wrong with the first episode. It goes by in a flash and promises to deliver on 6 games where the stakes couldn't be higher. There's an evil mastermind at the head of the organization with a hierarchy of mysterious guards at his side. The episode is stylistically awesome and doesn't shy away from the brutality of the games and the reality that the players escaped from. From a blade up the nose to piles of bodies, this episode is designed to make you sweat. The episode showcases the juxtaposition of nostalgia for a simpler time when there was nothing to do but play games, and the boredom that has been instilled into the rich from having too much money and being left with nothing but to play more games. Slow motion is used firstly for the black and white images of the past, then again during the card flipping sequence, and finally the red light green light sequence. It does detract a little from the show's intentions of showing brutality through realism, but by using slow motion in a way not dissimilar to how sports highlights are shown, we are shown exactly how those in charge of the games are able to gain pleasure from this deathly sport. The show also puts forward a unique stylistic aesthetic through its production design. From a wide shot of the contestants' bedroom to the CCTV machines shaped like old arcade machines, clearly a lot of thought and effort went into designing this facility. Even the corridors were designed with inspiration from MC Escher's Relativity. The maze-like quality of these areas were also inspired by anthills, perhaps reflecting the vulnerability of the people within this facility. Perhaps the most significant and gripping aspect of this first episode is Lee Jung-jae's phenomenal performance as Song Gi-hoon. This is a pathetically sympathetic character on the path to redemption for all of his life's mistakes. His journey to the games is such a roller coaster, going from rags to riches to rags to riches through collisions of good and bad luck over the space of 30 minutes. These are strongly enforced by Lee Jung-jae's explosive outbursts of irritation and joy, displaying a range of emotions emotions throughout the entire series. Financial debt is such a global issue. It's no wonder the show has captivated so many adults around the world. What would perhaps appear as a localized problem for Koreans sent rippling shockwaves around the world. As far as I know, their handbank doesn't exist in Korea. The reason I bring this up is because the colors of the ATM room that Gi-hoon and his friend find themselves in are reminiscent of Korea's largest bank, KB Kookmin Bank. When Gi-hoon tips the betting shop clerk, he is actually telling her to buy an Americano coffee. Like, seriously, outside of the winter, everyone's drinking ice Americanos. Tipping is definitely not something that is done in Korea, so perhaps this action might be more insulting than polite. After dropping off his daughter, Gi-hoon is seen waiting for the Shinbundang line, one of the more expensive lines to take on the Seoul Metro. I note this because I believe it is to highlight the wealth disparity between where the daughter lives and where Gi-hoon lives. As much as episode 2 has qualities worth praising, this is the definition of a filler episode. What this episode excels at is living up to its namesake. Considering all the characters are put through hell at the end of episode 1, to then draw that same comparison to the reality they're escaping from serves as a further reminder of how integral to survival money is. Every single character is reminded of why they left in the first place. The Pakistani character Ali can't even buy a bus ticket home whilst succinctly enacting the foreigner's experience of being in South Korea.
감사합니다. 사장님, 감사합니다. 안녕히 계세요. 감사합니다. 감사합니다, 사장님. 미안합니다. 감사합니다. 감사합니다.
There was quite a nice little revenge plotline for Ali as well. Later in the series, we see that he is missing 2 fingers, and I think it's fitting that he crushes his boss's fingers in probably the same machine. The abject poverty some of these characters live under is very well represented too. Ali's tiny apartment with a wife and child is seemingly cramped despite lacking furniture. Gi-hoon and Il-nam eating raw ramyeon and drinking soju, which is Korea's 16% £1 per bottle alcohol. Jesus, it's bleak stuff. All of the characters, except Il-nam, need cash, not just to pay debts, but to pay for bus fares and rescue family members across the North Korean border. Everyone in the whole bloody world needs money, and this show's harrowing jabs at capitalism are just as effective as those seen in the 2019 Korean film Parasite. Speaking of Parasite, actually, the score for Squid Game was written by the same person who wrote the score for Parasite. It gets that balance of brutal survival and humor just right, being subtle enough to let the visuals do the talking whilst also providing a rhythm to the scene. This balance is best displayed when the combination of a haunting organ is heard beneath the 8-bit arcade music whenever the piggy bank fills up with money. This was a great way of illustrating how morbid people's deaths generating money is. It's a shame that the CGI money is CGI money, but at least you can applaud the facility for its focus on fairness. When I play games, fairness is just everything to me. Though most of Gi-hoon's involvement in this episode revolves around failed attempts to persuade the police of his kidnapping, the starkest element was that of his mother's declining health. Why? Because health insurance is very much a thing in South Korea, and foreigners, myself included, have to pay a considerable portion of their pay just in case they get sick or injured. And even if you do get ill or injured, you're not necessarily covered by the insurance. Private healthcare can actually do one, like seriously. I did appreciate the way that the show foreshadowed future events in this episode. The North Korean defector character Kang Se-byuk is shown putting a knife to a broker's throat, as she in turn will be killed in this manner in episode 8. There's also an awesome moment when Gi-hoon's childhood friend Sang-woo comes out of a bathtub drenched in water like he will be in his death scene. As mentioned, I don't think much of this episode is particularly necessary for the plot. The majority of the characters that leave the facility wind up returning by the end, making me wonder what the purpose was if only to flesh out a few characters. Don't get me wrong, these are worthy characters to flesh out. I also imagine this filler is the result of stretching the original 120-minute script into a 9-episode series. It just begs the question, if you cut from the end of episode 1 to the beginning of episode 3, would it have made any difference? The only significant change was giving Serbiok a knife to open a vent in episode 3. With the majority of people voting to terminate the game, this then means that the 100 people who wanted to stay presumably just end up sitting around at home waiting for a card to show up so they could be dragged back to the island again. Not only is it risky business kidnapping a bunch of people and putting them all on a boat to begin with, but having to repeat that entire process just for the sake of fairness and upholding democracy, it seems like a bit of a stretch to believe. Obviously, this operation has a lot of money to throw around, but considering how easy it was for Junho to infiltrate the game, I find it surprising that the facility's managers would have taken such a risk. I also think giving certain characters special treatment diminishes the value of the other players whose lives will be lost. I'm not asking for more characters to be highlighted at such an early stage in the show, I just think it's worth pointing out that the characters who aren't highlighted in episode 2, such as Minyo and Ji-young, are significantly developed, the latter in very little time at all. And I'll be damned if I don't commend that lovely synchronized set of shots of the main characters waiting to be picked up. This show is so well shot. There are two absolute highlights in this episode. The first is the previously mentioned character Minyo, who is absolutely priceless. Bleating about her kid, nearly pissing on the floor. Like, what a great performance from Kim Joo-ryong. Like, she is so funny. 10 out of 10 character. That whole segment with her in the bathroom screaming about being constipated was top notch too. The whole segment leaves both the guard and the audience utterly speechless. The other highlight is the second game of the series, which might be my favorite of the lot when considered in isolation. Even with the knowledge of sugar-filled vats being seen the night before, nothing could prepare a participant for such an intense exercise of precision.
다 같이 한 곳으로 갔다가 모두 불리해질지도 몰라. 그런가? 투자에도 그런 말이 있어. 계란을 한 바구니에 담지 마라.
The irony being that Sang-woo's advice would only be received well by people who know that all his investments have crumbled to dust in the outside world. This is when Sang-woo's character begins to be fleshed out, showing how much of a shady person he really is. Though he may seem selfish, his reliance on himself obviously helps him reach second place by the end. With the characters choosing a difficulty setting without realizing they're picking one, that realization from Gi-hoon was absolutely incredible. The dolly zoom on his face, then cutting back to Sang-woo's POV, the despondency displayed by Lee Jung-jae, surrounded by other people, with a close-up on Sang-woo's face of guilt right after that. 10 out of 10.
놀이터가 뭐가 이렇게 커?
It's clear that the showrunners wanted to create a larger-than-life quality to these rooms. Obviously, as a child, everything seems way bigger and your perception of playgrounds and things shrinks as you age. Once again, the mix of childlike innocence with a human bloodbath makes the horror of this game ingrained into the viewer's memory. Whilst watching the games, it makes us wonder why we ourselves take pleasure in watching this stuff. Obviously, this show's a fiction, but there's nothing to say that something like Squid Game couldn't happen in real life. If the ultimate purpose of the Squid Game in this story was to produce some form of entertainment for a selection of billionaires, what does that say about us? Millions of people that tuned in to watch what these men also find to be the height of entertainment. I can't exactly tell you why I find the body going down the slide with a trail of blood to be metal as hell, but I still think it is all the same. Perhaps it's because I can make a distinction between reality and fiction that I'm able to justify my enjoyment of this kind of entertainment. What I find most disturbing about the murders in this game, though, is that they aren't automated like the first one. Humans are actually doing the killing now. This heightens the stakes further, as gunshots and shaky hands don't make a good combination for people who are trying to carve out shapes in biscuits. With the players finding ways to soften biscuit and metal alike, this game turns from morbid to hilarious. When the other players all imitate Gi-hoon making sweet tongue love to this biscuit by the end. What a perfect mix of humor and downright horror. The tension was through the roof during this game. 10 out of 10. Yeah, I've said that 3 times already, but these moments were just perfection to me. Working in the background of all this was police officer Junho infiltrating the facility. I did appreciate that the guards are effectively playing their own game, with them seemingly having more rules to follow than the players. This was established in the final scene of the episode, when one of the guards forgets the golden rule of COVID: never take your bloody mask off. An epic conclusion to an epic episode.
별 좋아. 요즘은 별 보기가 힘든 세상 아닌가?
He's not wrong. You can't see all in the sky in Seoul because of all the light pollution. And with that, we come to the end of part 1. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on parts 2 and 3 of the review series, as well as bonus videos that I'll be making in the run-up to the release of Squid Game Season 2. Check out the Patreon page. See you all soon.